Transformation Committee, the first one of 2024. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through the Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the Good Practice Guide, which includes muting microphones, switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please do not repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function, and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track of whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, but I anticipate we'll deal with these in our usual efficient manner. Item number 1, the Sediment apologies and Chair's approval of remote participation. Nick, can you provide the Sediment and apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. This morning we have an apology from Councillor Hislop, the Chair, and we have 11 members in the chamber, being Councillors Marsh in the Chair, Councillors Doogie and John Campbell, Councillor Dorwood, Councillors Jameson, Malcolm Johnston, Mail, Scobie, Stitt, Thompson and Wilson, and we have 9 members on Microsoft Teams. Thank you, Chair.
And item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest or a statement of connection they wish to make? Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. Statement of connection regarding agenda item 14, former Blair Center, Dalbeattie. I've been involved from day one between correspondence between the people who are wanting it and the council, but I don't think it's going to affect my decision today. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. Any further declarations or statements? And Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. It's a statement of connection in regards to item 5, 6 and 7 as COSLA Resources spokesperson. This is a national position, so it doesn't affect my ability to be involved in the debate locally, so it's just for the minute. Thank you.
Grand. No further declarations. Item number 3, the minutes of the previous meeting of the 14th of November 2023. Can we note and agree the minutes for November 23? Agreed. Item number 4, outside bodies. Annual Review 2023, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. This report provides the first annual review of outside bodies where we have current appointments through this committee. A wee omission on page 25 of the appendix of the paper. I'm quite sure the eagle-eyed out there will have spotted it. It should say the council spend is approximately £48 million per annum across all contracts. Tracy Sonko is here to assist if members have any questions. Before I proceed, can I invite Councillor Caroline Wilson to add any comments on the Scottish Excel Joint Committee, where she is the Council's representative?
Thanks, Chair. Forgive me because I wasn't expecting to have to speak on this, so I've kind of just wrote something really quickly. So, since 2008, Scotland Excel has helped establish public procurement as an effective driver for local and national economic growth and well-being. Their services are designed to help their members deliver the sustainability as well as a host of social, economic and environmental benefits. Being a member of Scotland Excel provides this council with an opportunity to influence collaborative contracts which are procured nationally for all local authority spend. The contracts are awarded as frameworks with multiple lots and suppliers, which allow members of Scotland Excel to choose the suppliers which best meet their specific needs. This also encourages local suppliers, including micro businesses and SMEs, to bid for a place in their frameworks. In 2023, Scotland Excel launched their new 5-year strategy, which will focus on 5 major goals. These are the journey towards a net zero Scotland by 2045, financial sustainability of public services, community wellbeing, development of resilient supply chains and advancement of skills to deliver Scotland's economic transformation. The Dumfries and Galloway Council had a total spend of over £40 million on Scotland Excel's frameworks in 2022 to 2023, which is 25% of the council's spend. I have the annual report here and I'm happy to share that with members if that's helpful. And for me personally, I found it really interesting. I've learned a lot, and I'd like to thank Karen Scott for all her help and support in that role. Thank you.
Grand. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I'll now open up the meeting for debate, and I can see initially Councillor Hagman is first, and then yourself, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this report before us, and I appreciate that there is a bit of dubiety about where there has been a change of membership regarding the annual reports. And perhaps I need to do a bit of background homework on this one, because we're in a cycle of committees, and this is the first time that we've actually had one of these appointments with the annual review coming to FPT. I guess my question is there any opportunity for members on the committee to get further information or to know when meetings are being held, etc., out with the annual review? I appreciate we've got an appointment to an outside body, but it's just so if members do have an interest in a particular outside body, how can they get further information on that? Thank you.
Tracy, would you be able to furnish us with some information on that one, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Hagman. It's not something that we currently have on our website, but I can certainly take that forward as part of the reviews now that we're up and running with the annual reviews, and I can take that forward for coming years and try and put some form of calendar on the library where we keep the list of outside bodies if members would find that helpful.
Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, no, I think that would be exceedingly helpful if we had an outside bodies calendar. I know it's something that's been raised within the Business Bureau, and obviously we're just focusing on Scotland Excel here today, but I know that this has been an ongoing issue across all the outside bodies. So if that's something that can be taken forward as an action, I know certainly members within my political group would be really happy to see that. Thanks.
Grant. And Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think 4.2 obviously helps clarify just in terms of the process. Obviously, we will start to see these reports for each of the respective committees where a representative has been appointed to an outside body. So it's actually good to be able to focus our attention on that and be reminded of what the range of business elected members get up to. And thanks to Councillor Wilson for providing a bit of a summary of what goes on. I used to be on the Scotland Excel subcommittee, and I also found it interesting, so it's good to have that feedback loop, and I would welcome if there was a wee bit more information for elected members and the public even to be able to track the kind of business we're interested in on outside bodies. So I'll not put Councillor Wilson on the spot because she's had that already. So but that was really it. So it was just to sort of welcome this, and presumably this will be coming up to each of the subcommittees going forward or committees going forward.
Yes, that is the case. Do we have any further questions for item 4? Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually just I'm looking at recommendation 2.2, and obviously it's quite important that the council has a representative on this body. So part of 2.2 is to agree whether the current active appointment should continue. So I personally think it should.
Grand. Thank you, Councillor Johnston. If we have no further questions, we'll move to recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the activities undertaken outlined by Councillor Wilson since the appointment was made in 2022, and member representation has remained stable for 12 months. And number 2, agree the current active appointment should continue following review and whether the outside body should be removed. But clearly, we would like it to continue with the addition, as Councillor Hagman has requested, of further information plus a request for a calendar as well. I'm quite sure we could action that also. Thank you. Item number 5. Local Government Finance Settlement 2024-25 and the impact of the Financial Strategy report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides members with updated information on the Council's overall budget position following the announcement of the Local Government Finance Settlement for 24-25. I would draw members' attention to the updated funding gap for 2024-25 based on the assumptions in the budget model, which is an estimated £10.4 million. Before opening up the meeting for member debate and questions this morning, I would just like to say a few words on this year's financial settlement and the bearing and impact it will have on our Council's finances. Again, the lack of a multi-year financial settlement from the Scottish Government makes our Council's job all the more difficult. This settlement is a continued real terms erosion of local government funding. We should not underestimate the gravity of the situation that we face as a council that's replicated right across Scotland. Local government finances are in a critically poor state. I would like to echo the thoughts of our council leader, Councillor Gail McGregor, who stated COSLA's position. Every year at budget time, COSLA urges for fair funding for local government to maintain the essential services our communities rely on. No increase in our core funding damages these services. This budget settlement will absolutely do just that. It will undoubtedly be felt by the most vulnerable people within our local communities who we have a duty to protect. In addition to the real terms cash reduction, the call by the Scottish Government to freeze council tax without any notice or prior consultation simply compounds that situation. To remove the most important fiscal flexibility and local control available to the council to balance its budget by freezing council tax only erodes further our financial sustainability in the long term by reducing the council tax base. And in addition, it absolutely calls into question the validity or even the point of the Verity House Agreement, an agreement which was set up to supposedly share a vision for more collaboration between central government and local authorities to deliver our shared priorities for all the people of Scotland based on a relationship of mutual trust and respect. To be able to protect our vital services and deliver on our council priorities of protecting the most vulnerable people, building our local economy and providing the best start in life for our children, we as the council have some serious work to do. The one saving grace is that in Lorna Meehan and Paul Garrett and his team of financial officers, we have an extremely experienced and talented team at the helm. The Audit Commission report at the end of last year stated the council are in a very safe and solid financial position when compared to some. That will allow for the use of some budgetary reserves in the short term. That is only due to the strong leadership and prudent and frugal financial management that we have seen from our FPT officers. Subject to debate today, if members are agreed, then the Chair and myself would be happy to write to the Scottish Government on the impact the financial settlement will have for our council. I'll now open the floor for member debate. And Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. I think we'll all agree that this is a dismal settlement for our council from the Scottish Government. 11.8 million funding gap means services and jobs being left on the brink by the Scottish Government, putting councillors of all political parties in a difficult position and being unable to deliver the manifestos we stood on at the council elections less than 2 years ago. I'd like to thank Councillor Katie Hagman for her work in standing up to these cuts from the SNP Green Government. As the paper states, there is still some way for the legislative process to go. Well, I'm hopeful that the Scottish Government may rethink these cuts in the Stage 1 debate in the Scottish Parliament this afternoon. Not sure that will happen. So I would like to propose an additional recommendation that the Council Leader writes to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister to reiterate COSLA's lobbying position and to insist that the council tax freeze is fully funded. Although I disagree with the cuts from the Scottish Government, I think it's more important than ever that we look at how we as a council are spending money and making sure every penny goes to the betterment of local residents and businesses. The Labour Group does not consider spending more money to restructure the council senior management as a priority for local people or delivering for local people. So we think that serious consideration should be given to at least pausing implementation in light of this funding gap. One final point I wish to make in relation to 4.24, which states support will continue to be provided to the budget panel and to all members to inform the budget considerations prior to the consideration by full council on the 28th of February 2024. The Labour Group do not believe we've received sufficient support as in previous years needed to compile a comprehensive budget proposal. So therefore I'd like to add an additional recommendation that we agree that all political groups receive support to compile the budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I would just like to add that there does remain, even now, significant ongoing uncertainty associated with the lack of supporting information. But I think Paul will be far better placed to elaborate on that than myself. Paul?
Yes, well, firstly, obviously very keen to support all groups in relation to the development of their budget proposals, and I've been in contact with the relevant senior members this week, including Councillor Wilson, in relation to that. But as you say, Chair, that there is still some required clarification from the Scottish Government to support councils in making informed budget choices this year, but obviously we're looking to get that information to feed that to all groups and to the budget panel as we received it. But if there's anything in particular that groups feel is not being made available in terms of support at the minute, then happy to take that into consideration and try to address that.
And Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I haven't come with a prepared speech, but I was just going to quite happily note this because that's all we're being asked to do. Obviously, you'd suggested after your prepared words just about an additional recommendation to write, and Councillor Wilson, with her prepared words, suggested also a slightly different recommendation to write. So there's two recommendations there to be considered about. Maybe just write two letters, eh? I'm sure it'll make twice the amount of difference. But obviously, I mean, I don't really want to get into it other than we're dealing with a situation. The Scottish Government, this is still subject to change. There's decisions going to get taken up the road. We have to make decisions locally, and I think we have to focus our attention on that because we seem to have very little influence despite our best efforts, but we can continue to try and do that. And I know the Scottish Government itself is sort of subject to the strictures of a UK government, which obviously is subject to change in the near future. But I think we have to put it in the context of that, because while we don't like what's coming from the Scottish Government, ultimately Scotland doesn't like what's coming from Westminster. So can we just note this, and obviously happy to, as a council, write in a lobbying position to try and get a better deal. But should we write one letter or two? Because I don't know if you were both listening to each other or if we have to do two letters. So happy to get to a strong position for this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Yep, I take on board what you're saying. I think we could combine and draft one letter. I think that will suffice. But yes, we can absolutely add that as another action. I take your point that we have to focus locally, and with the team we have, I'm quite sure we'll be on top of that and adequately address our very dire financial situation. Councillor Hagman and then Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, while we're writing letters, I'm aware that the Deputy First Minister has publicly mentioned the fact that there may be consequentials coming down the line in terms of the spring budget, but she's very concerned that actually they may not be translatable to local government. So do we need to be writing to Westminster as well, just ensuring that any consequentials are able to flow freely and that the Scottish Government won't be constrained, that we will actually see those consequentials coming through? So do we maybe perhaps need to write another letter to the Westminster Government and that lobbying position alluded to by Councillor Thompson ahead of the spring budget? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hagman. I'm sure we can do that also. I'll seek further advice and clarification on that, but I'm sure that could be a request that we could undertake. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. It was just basically to agree with Councillor Thompson that we're noting these items, and I'm quite happy to progress with that. But equally, I'm not entirely sure it's for the FPT committee to pause a restructure of the council. Surely that's a full council decision. But reading the Telegraph this morning, they devoted quite a bit to what's occurring in Scotland at the minute with the settlement, with the rates freeze and potential rates freeze, and whether we're going to be able to set our own rates level. Is there anybody could give us an update on that? I mean, it is in the public domain because it was in the Telegraph this morning. So, have you got any update, Paul?
Would you like to give in there, Paul?
Can I just clarify, are you talking about non-domestic rates there rather as council tax, or are you talking about the council tax? I'm
actually talking about council tax. I said in the Telegraph this morning that councils were asked to confirm whether they were going to accept the freeze and the associated payment, but wanted indication by the 16th of February when our budget setting day is the 27th.
Yes, so no, in relation to council tax, obviously the COSLA and councils have been seeking some movement from the Scottish Government in relation to the current requirement or expectation in relation to councils freezing council tax at 23-24 levels. There was a letter received from the DFM, the Deputy First Minister, last Friday, which requested that councils provide an indication by the 16th of February whether they intend to freeze their council tax. But as you say, most councils, in fact the significant majority of councils, will not be meeting to agree their council tax and budget until after that date. It's very much an individual council decision where they set their council tax levels. So my understanding is it is unlikely that most councils will be able to respond to that request by that date of the 16th of February.
That was actually mentioned in the particular article as well, that if you couldn't respond definitively by the 16th, we're looking for an indication. Is that the case?
Paul, through you.
That is correct. But as I say, I think most councils will find it difficult to provide that indication because the setting of the budget and the council tax goes through the appropriate process, which is through members and full council agreeing the budget and council tax, and in most cases that will be after the 16th. So my understanding is that it is unlikely that the majority of councils will feel able to respond to that request by that deadline.
Does that satisfy Councillor Johnston? Councillor Jamieson and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. It's just a point. I would also like to thank the finance officials for all the work they've done in the last number of years. I'd also like to thank the administration that was in place at the time over these last number of years as well for the goods of financial structures and the cooperation that the elected members, all elected members have with the team. I'm new to this, but I found them very approachable, very knowledgeable, and always available at any time. So I don't think there is any lack of support. I think there is pressure on elected members to actually read the papers, and I'm as fault as anybody else, and I spend a lot of time reading the papers, and I find the FPT particularly challenging because it is a very specialist job. But Paul and the team have always been available to explain anything to us. So I wouldn't back any recommendation that asks that they should be doing any more, because I don't think there's much more they can do. They're always available, and it is our responsibility as well to ask questions that we need clarification on, but also to do our homework so that we at least have gone halfway to meet them. So I just want to make that point that I found them extremely helpful, and our group has found them extremely helpful. I'm also a wee bit disappointed in some of the political point scoring here. There's a serious position, but we're in a better position than many councils across the UK. And we mustn't forget that it's a UK issue, and everybody's struggling with various challenges with inflation, etc., etc., etc. So I think we should get our heads down and think about Dumfries and Galloway, how best we can prepare for the upcoming budget discussions in a collegiate manner, rather than pointless political point scoring.
Just to go back on that, Councillor Jameson, I wasn't trying to score political points, if that's what you referred to. I absolutely did state that we are in a very lucky, fortunate position, and that's down to the FPT officers. And also the members. Yep. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just a sort of minor point, but I think we go to great effort to make information publicly available, and I suppose the public sector subsidises that. So COSLA and this council, all local authorities in Scotland, we publish information for the benefit of the public and our members to read. I appreciate some of us might be in the fortunate position to go through paywalls and buy specific publications printed by private consortiums or whatever, Telegraph being one of them. But not everybody reads that, and I just think we have to sort of say we've got the papers in front of us with the best information, the objective information, without any particular political leaning, because that's what our officers are good at. Similarly, it's public information. I don't think we should be promoting any particular private newspaper which we can read over early morning coffee at 11s or whatever. I don't know, but I would just think we should focus on the objective information provided by officers, because I think it's probably better than any newspaper. Thank you.
I will add for the record that other newspaper publications are available, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, the only reason, I probably should just have said newspaper. I'll grant you that one, Stephen. It was the fact that I was a bit concerned at some of this information, because I think it's coming up at, I think Councillor Hagman referred to it tomorrow, and I wasn't sure whether it was for public discussion at the moment or not. You know, and either way, we would have been raising it at a budget panel tomorrow. So.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could have some clarification. Do the Scottish Government actually get a lump sum at the beginning of the financial year from the Westminster Government? Or, as I've been told, and I don't know if this is right, the money doesn't come through until the Westminster Government has actually spent the corresponding sum in England, and then the Scottish Government gets its share of that spend. For instance, if you look at the doctors' settlement, which has happened in Scotland, that, if that's the case, that will be fully funded by the Scottish Government without any help so far from the Westminster Government until they settle with the English doctors. So could I have some clarification, please, of when the Scottish Government actually gets their funding from Westminster?
Thank you, Councillor Young. Paul, could you advise us on that one, please?
Yep, so through the UK government's budget process, the Scottish Government receives confirmation of its block grant for the upcoming period, and what happens is that is the funding settlement that is available up front, but there are subsequent decisions taken that may result in increased spending in other parts of the UK, which are based on services that are devolved to the Scottish Government, and where that is the case, then through what they call Barnett consequentials, the relevant proportion of funding associated with that comes through to Scotland, and that comes through as an addition to the Scottish Government's block grant, and the Scottish Government then determines how they allocate that additional funding. So just as an example of that, the UK Government in January announced increased funding, £500 million for local authorities in England. As a result of that, it's been indicated that £45 million additional Barnett consequentials funding will be made available to Scotland. So that's something that has come after the initial announcement on the back of a further increase that's been announced across the UK. That is the particular issue that Councillor Hagman was referring to earlier on. As I said, that money is being made available to Scotland. That's been confirmed, but the Scottish Government has not felt able to confirm that will be passed on to councils in Scotland at this stage, because they do have some concerns about potential other changes that may come through the UK Government's spring budget announcement.
Thank you, Paul. Does that answer your question, Councillor Young?
It does, Chair. Thank you very much.
And we have Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. Yeah, just to try and dilute the politics a wee bit, I'm very happy to write to both Scottish and UK Government if that's the will of members, and I will leave it in your hands today as to whether it's myself or the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Sorry. We now have Councillor Hagman.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me come back in again. I guess it's a question that I was maybe going to raise elsewhere, and there's reports here, but I'm wondering, are there any workshops planned for members of FPT and, in fact, the wider council? I know in the past when we've had audit reports, there has been really helpful seminars and workshops for members to really get an understanding of how all these processes work and what it actually means in plain English. Because, you know, as has been alluded several times in the committee today, some of the dialogue is a challenge to understand. So do we have, you know, built in, would it be possible to maybe have an annual refresh? I appreciate we do have a budget panel, but not all members obviously sit on that. And, you know, we're making crucial and really important decisions here, and we need to make sure that we have a full understanding of what it all actually means and how the sort of bigger picture works within this. So I guess my question is there an annual training schedule for Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee members, or is that something that we could maybe take forward? And actually, is it relevant to all members? Because, you know, we have quarterly updates and end of year and outturn reports across all our service committees, and I think it's absolutely vital that we can be confident that all our members fully understand and have the opportunity to refresh their knowledge as well as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. Is a sound request there, Lorna or Paul? Is it something we could look into, a seminar or further training?
Yes, no, absolutely, Chair. This is something we do on an ad hoc basis. That there's not a formal training plan, but what we tend to do is have specific workshops or member seminars to support considerations in relation to particular issues. As an example, we've recently arranged a workshop or seminar on the development of the capital investment strategy, which is open to all members on Tuesday afternoon of next week, and that's in recognition of the fact that obviously there's some significant capital projects that members are considering at the minute, and we felt as though it would be helpful to go through that in a bit more detail in the lead up to the budget setting process and the decisions that members will take then in relation to capital investment strategy proposals. So that is something we do, but it is on an ad hoc basis, so we could look at whether that could be formalised going forward into something more regular, but it's, as I say, it's something that we do on an ad hoc basis at the minute anyway.
Thank you, Paul. No, I would certainly say personally, I would welcome that. As far as, budget setting, etc., is a very complex thing to get your head around. As a new councillor, I think I would certainly appreciate it, as I'd imagine all other members would also. Thank you. If we have no further questions, I'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the details of the Local Government Finance Settlement 2024-25 as reflected in Appendix 1. 2. Note the specific purposes for which funding has been allocated within the funding settlement as reflected in paragraph 4.11. And 3. Note the Council's funding gap has been updated to reflect the impact of the Local Government Finance Settlement and changes to the budget operating assumptions as detailed at section 4.16. And 4. Note that the current projections reflected within this report may be subject to change as further information becomes available as the budget bill progresses through the Scottish Parliament. And I think we had a 5th possible thing to agree, if members are so, if they wish, we could write a letter to the Scottish Parliament if we are agreeable.
I think, and the Westminster Parliament as well.
And also to the Westminster Government also. Agreed?
Is that the leader or the chair and vice chair of this committee, or what are we asking to do?
I think we're perhaps going to need a budget line for stamps.
It's in your hands, members. If you would like the leader to do it, then I'm quite sure we could arrange that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And also, I think there was the action about exploring annual training or something appropriate, given that budgets are every year anyway. So, yeah, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Councillor Thompson will take that as an action as well. Thank you. Oh, and I believe Councillor McGregor wishes to come back in.
Yeah, just to assure that I'm very happy to put my name to any letters that are going to be sent. Thank you.
Grand. Item number 6. Further development of the Capital Investment Strategy, report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report develops the Council's current agreed capital investment strategy to reflect recent developments, including the announcement of the 24-25 Local Government Finance Settlement and updated projections of future capital investment levels. Paul Garrett and Karen Donaldson are here to assist if members have any questions. I will open the floor for members' questions. And Councillor Jameson.
My apologies. I'm getting my ears and my mouth mixed up as often as the case. It's a fairly obvious question, but the likes of Dumfries High School and particularly RAC, 7.6 million. It's a lot of money, and are we confident that there's not going to be any additional funding needed? And secondly, some of the buildings in question are relatively old anyway. I'm thinking of Dumfries Academy in particular, and there's a ongoing debate and discussion or plan to see what we can do with the Dumfries Academy. I'm assuming that we've looked hard at what we should fix and what we should maybe do away with and rebuild. I'm guessing we've done that already, so it's maybe a rhetorical question, but the £11 million extra for Dumfries High School has probably been due to delay and inflation and all the rest of it. The RAC is more uncertain in that we have to do it for safety's sake, but how we look seriously at options.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. There is an item later in today's agenda specifically on RAC. However, I wonder if Paul would like to come in just to answer the two queries there.
On the first query, in terms of the potential for additional funding to be received, that there has been some lobbying of both the UK Government and Scottish Government in relation to this, but as yet there's no indication that that's likely to be forthcoming, and I think at present councils are basically working on the assumption that they will have to fund it from within their own resources. So that's the current position in relation to that, Councillor Jameson. In relation to the review of what's actually required and whether future changes in the estate will impact on what we need to do with RAC, my understanding is that has absolutely been taken into account by colleagues. It might be that that's something that under the item later on with property colleagues in attendance will be able to give a bit more detail on that, but that is absolutely my understanding in relation to that.
Thank you, Paul. Any further questions? Councillor Campbell, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Yeah, it's just picking up on the point that Councillor Jameson was making about the Academy. I mean, it's in the appendix anyway, that the capital spend over the next 10 years. But there's also further mention on page 99, which says that it's just really waiting for an appraisal, because obviously the initial report that went for LEAP funding, which we weren't very successful in getting, was slightly more than what was in the capital budget. But I'm sure that the Academy, once the appraisal is done, that will be taken forward. But just to get kind of assurances on that. Thanks, Chair.
Paul, could you give some assurance there?
Yes, my understanding, I think as Councillor Campbell alluded to, is there is an option as appraisal being undertaken at the minute subsequent to that decision in relation to the LEAP bid. My understanding is that is likely to come to the Education and Learning Committee next month. So that's where members get to further consider the next steps in relation to that requirement.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. But I was looking at the forward plan, and there's only one item on education at the moment, so it'd be helpful if if that's the case, and we are going to get a report to education in March, that the forward plan is updated. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, would you like to come back in on that one?
Apologies. Yep, the same. My understanding is that is scheduled to come forward. I'm not aware of any change to that, so I'm happy to liaise with the relevant officers to make sure the forward plan's updated.
Grant, thank you, Paul. Do we have any further questions? No, I shall move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note 1, that the 24-25 local government finance settlement reflected a 7.5% reduction in the general capital grant, which equates to a 1.130 million reduction for Dumfries and Galloway Council in the 2024-25 financial year. That is projected that reductions in general capital grant will remove an estimated £18 million from the total funding available over the 10-year capital investment strategy. And 2, to note the estimated funding available to support capital investment across the 10-year capital investment strategy period 2024-25 to 2033-34, as summarised in paragraph 4.10, and associated currently committed capital spending summarised in Appendix 2. And lastly, 3, to note the potential further investment requirements outlined in Appendix 3 for member consideration as part of the development of the capital investment strategy proposals, recognising that the extent of these potential further investment requirements significantly exceeds the estimated funding available over the 10-year capital investment strategy period. And there is therefore a need for prioritisation between potential investment requirements, taking into account both internal and external capacity to deliver and affordability considerations. 4, to note the development of cost requirements for 24-25 as detailed in paragraph 4.21. And lastly, 5, note the further support will be provided to members to support considerations on the development of the 10-year capital investment strategy as part of the current budget setting processes. Item number 7, fiscal flexibility, service concessions. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. members are provided with updated information on the service concession's fiscal flexibility, including the option to extend repayment period to 50 years. Paul Garrett and Karen Donaldson are here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor to member debate. Councillor Jameson.
Thank you. It's just a query we raised at budget panel. Could you just clarify? I'm fully in favour of the proposal. I just need clarification that was discussed at the budget panel. That when discuss a wee bit further or get clarified is that this is also a maintenance payment. So that the extension of the repayment doesn't affect when the maintenance contract stops. So just to get clarification of when that maintenance stops, and are we confident that there's sort of contractual obligation of the people that are in charge of maintenance, that we're not going to be left with a lot of updating, a lot of upgrading, etc., etc., etc. Because it wasn't envisaged that we would extend this, and while obviously if it's 30 years, in the original contract where the maintenance and the funding stock would still have that maintenance to do. So that hasn't changed in material terms, in terms of our responsibility to maintain the schools. But the question I'm asking is, are we confident there's enough in the contract to suggest that when we take over the maintenance of these schools, there's not a big snagging list that we've got to pick up the bill for?
Could you provide that clarification, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify that in applying this change, it's only changing the period over which we pay the debt repayment charge. It doesn't change the contract whatsoever, so those schools will still be maintained as they are now as part of the contract, through to 2039-40 when the initial PPP contract finishes, in 2042-43 for the Dalbeattie contract. At that point, there will be a maintenance requirement will then fall to the council, but it's important to note as part of both contracts, there will be an assessment done at handover to make sure that those schools are in the condition outlined in the contract. So basically the council and the contractor have to agree, and those assessments will be done at that point. And then when the maintenance is handed over to the council, obviously we've got significant budgets to pay for these contracts at the moment, so that funding would then be available to support the council taking forward the maintenance of those buildings. So no concerns in that regard whatsoever.
Thank you for that, Karen. Any further questions, Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So obviously this brings about potentially a non-recurring increase in general fund balances, as alluded to at 3.3. I'm just conscious that there's a report later in the agenda on the spend to save, which gives a bit of narrative around using change fund and borrowing. But I think obviously our concern, in terms of the dismal outlook that we've been talked about earlier, revenue, capital will buy the car, but revenue is what propels it, and I think it's our revenue that's precious. So any borrowing obviously will have an impact on our revenue funds, and I'm just thinking if this frees up potentially 6.5 of one-off funds, would it not make more sense to have that in the thinking about, rather than borrowing money, get the capital work done, and then our revenues at least more resilient to the challenges that are coming forward? Is that something that we can sort of join together, or will we hear that as we go through the reports? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Could you add some extra detail there, please, Paul?
Yes, so the previous report on the agenda on the development of the capital investment strategy actually takes into account that additional £6.5 million generated from this proposal, and what we've suggested in that earlier report is that is made available to support the significant demands currently facing our capital investment strategy. However, no, it will be a member decision what they want to reflect in their capital investment proposals. So if members were to determine that they could free up funding from that source and use it for others, such as to support that spend to save requirement, then that would be perfectly valid, and happy to work with members when they're developing the budget proposals if we want to take the use of that funding forward in a different way. So it's perfectly valid what Councillor Thompson has suggested. Obviously we can only use it once. I've suggested we use it to support the capital investment strategy, but perfectly comfortable with what's been suggested there as well.
Yep, come back in, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. So I think what draws my attention to it is that in the later report, which we will get to, is actually saying agree to borrow today. But actually we're still in the process of working up our budget proposals, which may actually include, as you've suggested, a perfectly legitimate alternative way of reaching a decision for item 12. So it's just really, I've been asked to do, there's a wee bit of tension there about what we're agreeing today and what we're actually taking through our budget proposal. So maybe a wee bit of clarity in the process about that. Thank you.
Could you further clarify that, please, Paul?
Yes, Councillor Thompson's correct that we're asking for agreement today. The borrowing wouldn't be undertaken until at least financial year 25-26. I think what we're saying is that in that later report is that the first year requirement for the Spend to Save project will come fully from the current monies remaining in the change fund. The borrowing will be specifically for 25-26 onwards. But as I say, if members determine, and I think in that report as well, we say that we will look for alternative sources other than borrowing prior to that. So if members were to take a decision that frees up monies elsewhere, that allows that to be funded without borrowing, then that's certainly something that could be addressed at that stage.
Does that satisfy your question? Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, I'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note 1, that a further review of options available within the service concessions flexibility under Scottish Government Finance Circular 10/2022 has highlighted that it would be appropriate to recalculate the debt repayment of the school's PPP and DBFM contracts over 50 years rather than the 40 years initially agreed by full council on the 28th of February 2023. And 2, note that the agreement to this approach will be sought as part of the council's 2024-25 budget setting process, and that members/political groups will be able to reflect the associated financial implications as part of their budget proposals. We're happy to note 1 and 2. Item number 8. Council Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2023-24 for the period ended 31st December 2023, which is quarter 3. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides members with an overview of the Council's overall financial monitoring position for the current financial year as at 31st December 2023 and the main financial pressures that are anticipated to impact on the Council's position, including the pay award and other budgetary pressures. Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross are here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor for member debate. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. I should probably add to my statement of connection, item 8. I think I said 5, 6, 7, but it should also include 8 if I didn't mention it at the start. I'm aware that this is the overall council revenue budget quarterly report, and we'll come into in further items the one specific to FPT. But I'm just looking at the papers just now, and I do think it's important that we can actually track some of these. So in Appendix 1, there is the reference to some of the other directorates, so communities, economy and resources, social work, etc. And I'm aware that some of these papers have already gone to their service committees, but there's no link to those papers within the background paper. So how do we link all the information? Because I'm looking at the table in Appendix 1, and I'm aware some of this detail has been reported to the relevant service committees, but there's nothing within the report that directs me where to find that information. I'm also aware that at our last committee, which we've just agreed the minute of, there was reference to the VAT refund from HMRC of the £2.1 million. Now, obviously, that was reported last time, but can I just ask, have we had that refund? Have we received that refund? Because I think the report last time in November said there was an indication that we would be receiving that. And have we actually received that 2.1 million? Because it's not referenced anywhere in the papers today. And perhaps it doesn't need to be because it was reported that we were expecting it. But I would have thought it would be mentioned somewhere within the reports today. Thank you.
Paul or Gillian even, could you assist on that one, please?
Yes, thank you. In reference to the background papers, normally at the time of when we go to print, not all the committee papers are actually released on the public domain, so it would be quite challenging to be able to do that, but we could add a reference in terms of when each service committee is actually due to consider that position, which might be helpful and provide that, and where there were the links we can provide that at that stage as well. In reference to the £2.1 million VAT, just to confirm that has now been received. It is referenced in Appendix 1 in terms of the variance that you can see against the non-distributed costs line within there. And I think following the last committee, we did send an update through to all members in reference to those resources being added to the amounts available for members' consideration as part of the budget process. But just to confirm, the resources have now been received.
Thank you, Gillian. Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd welcome the link to when the service committees are, and that's great that we have got that and it's being taken forward as part of budget considerations, the 2.1 million, because it's not an insignificant amount, although appreciate it is just one-off. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson.
Thanks again, Chair. So I'm just referring to Appendix 1 on page 123, and it's basically the forecast outturn, and it shows you, obviously in the table, it's got net expenditure to the end of that quarter and then the forecast outturn. Now, most of them, you could almost calculate by the quarter, because, you know, the forecast outturn for most of them is pretty much, you know, 3/4 of the total cost. So if you're 3/4 way through the year, you spent 3/4 of the money. Apart from community planning engagement and the non-distributed costs, all of which the bulk of the sort of payment is forecast to be outturned and basically spent in this final quarter. So I was just wanting to get a wee bit more information about that, because they're presumably most of the other ones are salaries, which are very predictable. Those ones there are slightly different. So why is the spending all done in the last quarter, I suppose, is the question for those two. Thank you.
Gillian, could you provide some clarity for that, please?
Yes, sure. The community planning engagement one's probably quite unique in that is where we hold the Ukrainian settlement resources within there. So with those resources, we get those up front from the Scottish Government, and so it includes the receipt of all of that money for a period of time, which there will be elements that will then be carried forward into the new year. So that's why the spend looks particularly low in relation to that one. In relation to the non-distributed costs, again, this includes a number of year-end transactions or kind of amounts that we've got within there. And again, the costs will come through at the year-end in relation to that. It is where we have a lot of the accountancy type transactions of that kind, of course.
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, no, thanks. That helps clarify. Thank you.
Grand. And we have Councillor Scobie.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at this report. I'm looking at page 118 regarding the education and learning. It has been reported to Education Committee in terms of the demand on the services, not just in ASN, additional support need transport, but also on the direct delivery. And I think the figure was something like 550, but it's anticipated to rise in this current year to I believe something like £750,000, and the narrative here seems to indicate a bit of optimism in terms of where they can draw on additional funding to support that particular pressure on additional support needs. I maybe have a more pessimistic view in terms of that this will be a recurring pressure year on year, because I don't see the numbers coming down, and it reflects an earlier report in terms when we do come to set the budget, in terms of this being a pressure on the budget in ensuing years that we've got to, because non-recurring or whatever mitigating circumstances are taken in this one, I think it will be a recurring pressure, and we've got to build into that, because there is a legal requirement in terms of delivering for all the children who do need that additional support. And again, similar on page 117, and there's a lot of mitigating circumstances under social work here, where they're again reflecting an overspend in the services on service demand, particularly this being a service demand delivery. So in this one, again, in terms of when we come to the budget, I would hope to see a reflection in both of those, that we are taking account of the pressures, not just that we look at roads and invest in roads, but like we invest in people, being in education and social work when we come to set the budget. It's just a marker here, Chair, that we still have excessive pressure on both these budgets that we've got to deliver on both as legal requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. I take from what you said there, obviously we have a contingency in the short term from service reserves to accommodate the ASN travel. However, are you suggesting we'll look towards something more long term? But I can let Paul come in there to answer your question.
Just to clarify, Chair, that is what I'm saying. And it's not just on ASN transport, it's on the direct delivery of additional support needs. As it says in that paragraph in 4.17, it's a significant increase in the number of pupils who require that additional support. So it's to reflect that, because a one-off to mitigate this year, then we do follow on to next year, although there's reference it could be for next year as well. Maybe Paul can...
Paul, can you come in there, please?
Yep, thanks, Chair. No, just really to provide some assurance in relation to those issues. Those issues that Councillor Scobie has identified are clear areas of significant budget pressure for the Council, and the earlier report on the agenda has an appendix on budget pressures, and that recommends and builds into the Council's budget model additional funding both for ASN delivery, for ASN transport, and for support for children and families services pressures as well. So there's a combination of both non-recurring funding and some recurring budget pressures funding on an ongoing basis reflected in there. So that is already taken into account in the budget model. So hopefully that provides some assurances in terms of how the Council's looking to address those significant pressure areas as part of the budget process.
I think that provides sufficient assurance, Councillor Scobie.
It does for Paul. It'll depend who comes forward with the budgets to make that we have those built into. It's all right in the budget model. We'll wait and see what the budget proposals come back with.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall, and then Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just a couple of questions in relation to the Appendix 2. The first one is on page 126. It's the second bottom one, target savings from future spend to save opportunities. A note from the comment as well, the outstanding work, and there is to be no savings made of the 200,000 this financial year. But if I look at the column on the full year saving forecast to be achieved from 2024-25, that is zero as well. So I just want a little bit more detail on that one. And the second one is on page 125, and it's the economy and development, reducing the council's property estate. A note that we're forecast to achieve 60,000 of the 100,000. The question I have here is, are we confident we're managing the council estate as well as we should be? I'm just in relation to leases. I've got a local example where a a council-owned business unit in Eastriggs had laid empty for 2 years after the lease had terminated, and was only after a local business contacting myself to inquire about it that we've just started the tendering process for leasing that building out. So I'm thinking, if I found an example in my ward, I'm just wondering how well we are managing the council estate when it comes to leases.
Paul, can you provide, or even Gillian, that extra detail there, please?
Sure, thank you, Chair. In relation to the first part of the query, in relation to the targeted savings from spend to save, so as referenced in the report, there are options that are being built up by officers, which you will see the further report on the agenda in relation to the energy efficiency that are coming forward. They do take quite a substantial amount of time to work up the details and provide those. So while we're saying that there is no savings to be delivered this year, and while we've recognised the shortfall on an ongoing basis, they will come forward as part of the budget process for future years as those proposals are coming forward. So those ones will be brought forward and recognised within the budget as they are delivered. In relation to the reducing the council's property estate, as we've referenced within there, that is purely a timing delay this year. There are a number of options already progressed within the agreed savings template, setting out planned reductions within our leased estates, rentals, and also the condensing of the council's overall property estates.
Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Marshall?
Yeah. I suppose probably the E&I is probably where I need to, kind of maybe drill a little bit down more about how we're managing the estate, particularly when we're trying to lease out units or buildings that the council have. But thanks for that.
And Councillor Jamieson, then Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I'm referring back to Councillor Scobie's comments and maybe just a wee bit of clarification, and also probably a plea as well. The additional resources budget has been increased significantly this year due to extra demand, partly due to the COVID consequences, but it's been rising for a number of years, and it significantly jumped this year, probably by a bigger percentage than we perceived. It jumped from something like 33 to almost 39. It's an ongoing problem. The thing that concerns me slightly is the lack of clarity in where the money comes from. I know it's come from service reserves because I sent an EMES and I've spoken to the Directorate. It's come from reserves that were underutilised for other issues, and that's maybe something that probably we could add a couple of lines in the explanation as to where it came from, because I'm always concerned with my passion for education. Is that we're not using the funding that's there. But this was quite legitimate. It was an underspend on 1,140 hours because of lack of uptake. So it was quite legitimately moved across to ASN. So that's a sensible approach. But to remove any doubt within our position, because I want every penny that's in the education to go to what it's there for. But beyond that, the funding that's run through the budget panel is for 3 years expenditure on the assumption that this is not going to go away. And my recommendation was that we have to assess it after 3 years to see if there is still funding needed for ESN rather than assume it's going to happen. So I fully support Willie's concerns, because as I do too, because I've learned to hate the word mitigation, and we're often mitigating something that's going wrong rather than providing the solution. But this extra money, which not only goes into more assisted learning assistance, it also goes into training and contracts and such like, is something that the Education Committee are really proactive about. So it's about clarity and assurances that in the relevant committees that are getting the information so that there's no vacuum that we fill ourselves. Why are you not using that money? Where does it come from? That sort of thing. That's not been nitpicking, it's just to save a question going to EMES, because that could easily be sorted out at an education committee. But not to miss the fact that ASN is a huge issue, and it's an issue not just for the kids involved, but the parents and the general Dumfries and Galloway society. So it's something we need to find a solution rather than mitigation by using up bits and pieces of reserve rather than dedicated funding. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite sure we could add that further explanation to the reports. But Paul, do you want to come back in there?
No, just to confirm, I'm happy to provide additional information to avoid the need for those kind of queries going forward, and fully appreciate the pressures currently in relation to ASN, but also fully supportive of the services approach of seeking to reduce the extent of the financial pressure associated with that, because obviously if we have to add to budgets on a current basis, given our current funding situation, that results in savings having to be delivered elsewhere on a recurring basis as well. So absolutely support the approach
totally
currently being
that.
taken by the service at the minute.
Thank you.
Grand. If there are no further questions, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just actually Councillor Marshall inspired me to ask, and it does relate to some of the savings we've got here, and particularly around our commercial properties, which, I mean, it's maybe a silly question, but are they included when we talk of non-school council estate? Because I know we've got a paper later on the agenda, which we've referred to in terms of energy reduction, spend to save, because I don't know if we do get full sight of our commercial properties, because I've had issues in my own ward where there's been maybe some lying dormant, or it's not clear who's maintaining it. And clearly, if we are passing on a saving to our small businesses, which we'd like to support, why would we make them charge over the odds for energy when we're actually reducing the cost of energy in the rest of our buildings? So I think, is that a saving that would be part of our commercial properties, or is that dealt with separately? So it's maybe a general question. It might relate to E&R, but I think there is something to be looked at in terms of how we're managing our commercial properties.
I think possibly Lorna wants to come in first of all, and then maybe Paul as well.
Just on the broader point, members who are also members of Economy and Resources Committee, but those who aren't, just for information, the committee has already agreed a review of our industrial estate, which will come forward. And in that report, which members agreed, I think, at the September committee of E&R, it was recognised that in that initial scoping that a number of our industrial properties are not necessarily those that are wanted fully by businesses, and they're not necessarily equipped in the way that we would anticipate would generate support. So there is a fundamental review, and it also links to the Borderlands investments for site preparations on 3 sites as well to provide for further business units. So that is quite fundamental. Paul will hopefully keep me right here, but the rent that is received from industrial properties is not treated as income as much as it's treated as an underpinning of your economic development team budget. It's a revenue stream that supports that activity. So it's not a kind of something that we look to gain much from in terms of income to add to the council's income position, and anything over and above that's already budgeted would be available to members. But there are some industrial properties that are vacant, and Councillor Marshall referred to that earlier, and part of that, not wholly, part of that is related to whether they're fit for purpose for modern business needs and the types of businesses that are looking for those properties. The council isn't the only operator of industrial properties in the region. There are private sector industrial providers, and indeed South of Scotland Enterprise are looking at industrial provision as well for business support as well. So there's a full report that is being developed as part of that review, Councillor Thompson, but we're not in a position just now to have the answers.
Thank you for that, Lorna. Would you like to come back in, Councillor Thompson?
It was just on the point of when we talk about, so I appreciate that report's coming and be very welcome. And if there is surpluses generated from the income, I think we have a particular issue in Annandale North and also Castle Douglas relating to common good land where there's caravan park, which I think might need to be discussed at E&R as well. But in terms of when we're applying energy saving initiatives to all council properties, does that include the industrial properties, or are they dealt with separately, as you've just suggested in that report? So I think it's because it does relate to 2 reports in here, one about the 400k in this particular revenue line of savings, and also the item 12 paper in terms of school and non-school council estate. So are we investing in properties that we might no longer need, basically, if we're doing a review? Thank you.
I think in general they're not included, but we will confirm that through the property team directly following committee, Councillor Thompson. We'll come back to you. I think there's the development of that review will bring forward proposals around that whole portfolio, but we will confirm in terms of the spend to save, and Paul will be joining the meeting later on that if we can get further detail through him.
And as far as the ward-specific industrial sites, Councillor Thompson, do you want to take that offline with Lorna?
Well, absolutely. It was just a cheap way of making a political point for a local issue, but that's fine. I can take that offline in the proper way. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note 1, the forecast service outrun positions against agreed budgets as provided in Appendix 1. 2, note the projected budget pressures within social work, children and families and ASN transport. The proposals to address these pressures in 23-24 as detailed in paragraphs 4.10 to 4.16. And that the approach to addressing these pressures on an ongoing basis is reflected within the parallel budget update report on this agenda. And finally, 3, note the progress against the delivery of agreed savings reflected within the 2023-24 budget as provided in Appendix 2. Happy to note all 3. Item number 9. Finance and Procurement Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for 2023-24 for the period ended 31st December 23. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. Members are provided with an overview of performance against budget for the period ending 31st December 2023 for Finance and Procurement. Gillian Ross is here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open up for members' questions. I don't see any hands. Are we happy to go to the recommendation? Okay. Members are asked to note that based on the position, as at the end of December 23, Finance and Procurement is forecast to contain expenditure within the available resources by the end of the financial year as detailed in Appendix 1. Item number 10. Capital Investment Strategy Monitoring for 2023-24, Quarter 3, report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides members with an overview of the financial and physical progress of the capital programme for the current financial year based on the position as at 31st December 23. Karen Donaldson is here to assist if members have any questions. Members? No. Oh, we have Councillor Hagman.
Thank you. Yep, I'm looking at, obviously with the recommendations are to agree the additional development cost requirements as detailed in 4.11. But there's not a report or any further details on that. And I've had a quick look and I can't see any link to where that's come from. And having been in the position you are there as Vice Chair of FPT, in the past, in terms of governance, where there's been additional requests for money, it's gone to the Service Committee, they've then made the recommendation, it's then come to FPT, there's a clear tracking of reports, etc. But I can't see that, but perhaps I've just missed it, and I'm just wondering, have these been reported to the service committees? Is there links to the reports as to exactly what these bits of funding are for? Because they're not linked in the report here today. And equally, when I have a look at Appendix 3, there's a specific reference to the Stranraer Marina and the Borderlands outline business, or the full business case being developed. But that wasn't reported at E&R committee just last week. There was reports on Borderlands and there was various key points raised under Borderland, but the specific issue of the Stranraer Marina was not referenced at all. So again, can we get some consistency? Because it's a point I make repeatedly. Our papers should be open and transparent, that any member of public can pick it up and they can see a clear rationale, they can see all the evidence and they can actually understand these, because it's not particularly clear and I don't think it puts us in a great light. Thank you.
No, I absolutely take your point, Councillor Hagman. The information in these reports has to be clear for members of the public, as well as ourselves, to be able to take on board. I don't know if Karen has anything else to add there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hagman. Just in relation to your first point about the development costs, the reason there's not been any sort of reports from the service committees is the development costs come to this committee for visibility. It was agreed that members wanted more oversight of costs that were being incurred in projects prior to sort of tender award stage on the design of projects. So that's what's in front of you today. So although we're asking for additional funding, it's acceleration of funding, so it's within the existing agreed project budget. So it's not new funding that you're being asked to approve. You're being asked to kind of approve the additional development funding over and above what was requested at the start of the year, because obviously the high school have done more development work than they had planned to at this stage, because some of the development stuff was normally done at construction, but because of the sort of approval delays, they've progressed that design work earlier than anticipated. And obviously with White Sands, we've got an approved budget within the 10-year programme. Full council agreed to pick up the development work on White Sands, so that's just the sort of initial development cost that's required this year. And obviously the earlier paper had details of the development cost requirements for next year that will be picked up as part of the budget proposals. With regards to your second point about Stranraer Marina, I'll check that. Certainly what's reflected in this paper was the most up-to-date information we had on the project, so I will double check the reporting between the E&R, because you're absolutely right, they should be consistent. So I'll take that point away and double check that for you.
Thank you, Karen. Is that okay, Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, no, so I've got this correct, we're not asking to allocate any new money. Are we drawing down money? Because the words are said that there's no new money here. So is this an earlier drawdown of an agreed allocation? So therefore, in 2.2, we're not agreeing additional development costs. I'm a bit confused. Is this new money or is this drawing down the existing budget earlier? Because it's not clear in the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. My take would be it's not new money, but I'll let somebody who knows much more than me answer your question.
No, thank you. You're absolutely right, Councillor Hagman. We're asking it to agree because it's additional development money, but it's not. It's just accelerating the project money. So what you said was exactly right. That it's part of it's just accelerating the existing allocation. But because it's an adjustment to this year's budget, we're asking the committee to agree it.
Grand. Thank you, Karen. Does that clarify there, Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful. Cheers.
Thank you. We have Councillor Scobie in the room and then Councillor John Young.
Yeah, Chair, it's just on the back of what Councillor Hagman, Katie's asking there, and in 4.9, while it may address the financial aspect of what Katie was asking, there is reference to this projected, the level of slippage project this year due to further time being required to develop the full business case. This one, and again, it's a question in delivery, and it was down to commence in 2025. Is this going to push it further back?
Karen, could you answer there, please?
Yep. Obviously, it is a significantly large, complex project. My understanding is that there's still anticipated that the marina project will be completed. Obviously, we've got 10 years to complete all the Borderlands projects, so absolutely it'll need to be delivered within that. I'm not aware of any significant changes to what's already been reported with regards to timescales for Stranraer Marina, but I'm not sure, Lorna, if you've got any further information or your understandings as mine.
Councillor Scobie, I'll have with Karen a look at the comments Councillor Hagman made there. I don't recognise the comments of inconsistency, but certainly we'll look at that in terms of the report. I think what's been flagged in this report, and Karen will keep me right, is there are some challenges around the costs because of construction inflation, and it is a complex construction project because it's on the water. But nonetheless, the monitoring both here and through the PMO for Borderlands Partnership Board with both governments is focused on the delivery of this project. And it's one of the projects that we're moving forward with. The move to full business case is rapid at the moment, and we are in the midst of preparing that full business case, and it will come back to members. But I'm not aware of any substantial delay. It's just simply, I think the risks being flagged here are about the potential for the full tendered costs, which we'll come back to members on, and we're looking towards containing that within the available budgets, but to achieve the same outcomes. But that's something we come forward to members.
Councillor Scobie, do you want to come back in?
Grateful for that explanation, and it is receiving the attention in moving forward, because the report does refer to cost inflation, construction cost inflation. So it's good it's still on target for the 2025.
Councillor Young.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Looking at page 141, I see the refurbishment of Dumfries Academy and the relocation of Lowerburn Primary School comes in with a projected cost of 23.6 million. Now, it's my personal understanding that when Dumfries High School is completed, the Dumfries schools would actually have capacity without using Dumfries Academy to educate all Dumfries pupils in modern schools. And I really don't understand why we're willing to spend this huge amount of money refurbishing Dumfries Academy when we have sufficient capacity elsewhere in the town. This is obviously separate from Lowerburn Primary School. It's just a personal point I'm making. It seems, and I know officers carry out the wishes of elected members, so I'm not blaming any officers or others for this. It's just a personal observation that we seem to be pouring money into Dumfries schools and forgetting other rural schools throughout the region. Thank you.
Karen, can you add anything on that point, or even Paul for Councillor Young there?
I don't think there was a specific question, Chair, but probably just to confirm for members that the options appraisal in relation to the Dumfries Academy Lowerburn School project will be coming forward to Education and Learning Committee for further consideration.
Thank you, Paul. We have Councillor Hagman online.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to reiterate what I was saying earlier in response to the Director's comments there. The Appendix 1 to Economy and Resources had where there was project variances, etc., and Stranraer Marina was not included in that. Stranraer Marina and the full business case was mentioned in Appendix 3, but that wasn't in relation to any funding slippage, etc., or this variance that is recommended here. So I just want to clarify, yes, it was mentioned in Appendix 3, but in the appendix where we've got the variances of the 654 that's in the papers today on page 145 wasn't captured in ENR. So I just wanted to make that really clear, because I'm not sure if I was previously. Thanks.
I think Lorna's going to come in to answer that. Katie?
Thanks for the clarification, Councillor Hagman. I think the Appendix 2 is flagging risk rather than slippage. And the paper, I think, as Karen's explained, is asking for acceleration of spend within the overall capital investment strategy. But we'll look at that to make sure that those are congruent and consistent in future reports. But we'll pick that up if there's anything else we need clarification on. Thanks.
Grand. Thank you, Laura. If there are no further questions, Councillor Jameson.
I appreciate this is an historical review in the last quarter, but Dumfries High School expenditures risen by £11 million, which is usually a significant sum of money. I'm just wondering, is it a timing issue that is not mentioned here, or have I missed it? But that's obviously a big pressure on our budgets, and the significant amount of money, £11 million on a £44 million project, seems very high, and I realise there's been a lot of delay and all the rest of it, but it may not be relevant to this particular agenda point or even this meeting, but it's something that I felt the need to raise.
I think that £11 million deficit was mentioned in the previous item, Councillor Jameson, but I can bring Paul back in again if you have anything to add.
Just to say that the budget that's referred to in this paper, Councillor Jameson, is the approved budget. So it is based on the £44 million as currently reflected in the agreed capital investment strategy, and the report focuses obviously on the expenditure in the current financial year. But as the Chair mentioned, and is not obviously aware as well, that the request for the additional £11 million to support the progression of the project is something for members to consider when setting their updated capital investment strategy at full council at the end of the current month.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Sean Marshall.
Yeah, Chair, just if you allow me, and it's just I hear these comments quite a few times, and you know, no disrespect to Councillors Young and Jemison, but obviously as new councils, they probably don't know the history behind the school estate, etc. And I'm kind of getting tired of hearing that, you know, Dumfries High and Dumfries Academy are you know, like they've been pushed to the front. They're actually at the back of the queue. So, you know, when we embarked on this over a decade ago, a lot of the rural schools, etc., they were attended to. And so we're getting to the final part of the programme. It's not that they've taken a precedent, they're actually at the back of the queue. So it's maybe at some point that, you know, all elected members get the full history on the whole school estate and why we took the decisions to, you know, build new academies at Dalbeattie, etc., and Lockerbie, and renewals at Annan, etc. So it's just that this comes up time and time again, and a lot of it is not factual.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. It may well be beneficial to members, new ones like myself, to have that, you know, historical background information when we talk about these issues. Councillor Jameson.
No, just to assure Councillor Marshall that I've done my homework. I know all the history because I was on the parent forum for many, many years. So please don't include me in that generalisation. I absolutely know all the history, and I'm having no particular dig at Dumfries or any other area. The new transformational work that the Education Committee is doing is some tremendous work, and it's including the whole of the region. So I'm not having a dig at anything. It's just about the significant delays in the progress of Dumfries, and that's to do with elite funding, etc., etc. So I'm not pointing the finger at anybody whatsoever. I'm just raising the issues that a fundamental issue that we've talked about before is the delays, and the delays in getting things moving, and also the lack of technical people within the area that can actually deliver it. So not all contracts can go ahead as per the speed that we would like them to that, because we can't get the folk to build them, basically. So that was just a comment, and I know Sean's said it in well-meaning, but I do take umbrage that I've not done my homework.
Appreciate that.
Point definitely taken, Councillor Jameson. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank Councillor Marshall for pointing that out about the two schools in Dumfries that we're talking about. I had a visit to Dumfries Academy last week, and it is beyond any doubt that something needs to be done about that school sooner rather than later. And in any briefings that I've had, when it comes to the school numbers, we do need Dumfries Academy. When we add up the capacity of the new Dumfries High School and the Northwest Campus, we're still well short of what we actually require going forward. So I very much look forward to the report coming about the DLT2 continuation with Dumfries and Galloway and Lorburn Primary, because that will highlight the fact that we actually do need to spend this money. But I'll make another wee point that I've made at budget panel as well, is that I think when we keep getting some of these reports, that we do need to be more robust in some of our costings and estimates going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, it's not actually factual, because I've done the sums. There is reasons why we may and probably do need an extra school, but it's not down to numbers. That if you add the numbers up, as I've done, there's enough spaces for every child in Dumfries and Galloway, but it's more complex than that. So I just don't want folk to think that it's just a binary number. There's issues to do with St Joseph's and North West Campus and all the rest of it. So I'm not saying we don't need another school, but it's not just down to numbers.
Thank you, members. I'll move to draw this item to a close now by going to the recommendations. Unless, no. Yep, members are asked to 1. Note the financial and physical progress against the 2023-24 capital programme for the quarter ending 31 December 23 as detailed in appendices 1, 2 and 3. And 2. Agree to the additional development cost requirements as detailed at paragraph 4.11. And 3. Note the current prudential indicators based on the 31st December 23 monitoring position as detailed in Appendix 4. Item number 11. The reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete council estate. Report by Head of Economy and Development. Members are presented with a report seeking approval of funding to allow the completion of the initial RAC remedial works. We are also advised of the requirements for funding to be allocated to create a programme of works that will remove RAC from the Council's estate. This is to be considered a part of developing capital investment strategy proposals as part of the budget process. Paul McCulloch is here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor for member debate. And we have Councillor Stitt.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just reiterate what I brought up last week. Education. This council's facing financial problems, and as what I said, education at the chair or the vice chair or the leader of the council should write the Scottish Government requesting supporting this RAC, because 7.2 million is a lot of money to find every 3 years.
Thank you, Councillor Stitt. I'm quite sure we could take that forward as an action. Any further questions? Councillor Thompson.
Just to make it for 7.6 million so we don't get shortchanged. Thank you.
Of course. Any further questions? Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's another headache, shall we say, financial headache for us. However, this is not just unique to Scotland. You know, it's the whole of the United Kingdom. RAC is being, found in a number of schools, and I don't know where Westminster are coming from, but I don't know if Paul has had any word, if there's going to be any consequentials coming from Westminster that would alleviate some of this funding. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I don't believe there is currently, but I'll pass over to Paul just to, if he can, elaborate on that.
No, unfortunately, the indications are that there's unlikely to be any additional funding passed to councils in the UK to support these additional requirements. This is something that's been on for quite a while. There's a number of councils who are affected, significantly to a greater extent than ours in terms of the bill associated with this, but to date there's been no indication that that's likely to result in any additional monies being passed through to councils.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's just that I was watching the Parliament channel a few weeks ago, and it was raised in there that, local authorities in England, are in the same boat as us, that they have to try and find this funding. But at least the Scottish Government, if we can get that letter to them, and then we can try and get some of this funding. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Young.
Great, thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering if there's any way the council can encourage local firms or a local firm to get upskilled to enable it to carry out this quite specific and new work. I just fear that once again there'll be employing a Central Scotland firm to come down and remove the bad concrete, shall we say, from our schools. And I just wonder, can we encourage a local firm so we can provide employment and the money stays within this region when this work is done on behalf of Dumfries and Galloway Council?
Thank you, Councillor Young. Yeah, my knowledge of RAC is limited to what I see within these papers, but I would imagine it's a fairly specialised thing to be involved in or having to deal with. I don't know if Paul could come in there and give us a little more information.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So in terms of RAC remediation, it's not really specialist. The RAC itself was a product that was used at a period in time, and it was considered to be a product that was suitable. Now, over time, it's proved not to be the case, that in terms of its longevity, it has a limited sort of lifespan. So in terms of removal of the RAC and replacement with a suitable alternative, it's not really specialist work. What we're currently undertaking in terms of the immediate remedial work is being undertaken by a local company, and it's certainly intended as we go out to procurement for the larger removal programme that will look to include local firms. So local firms will in no way be barred, if you like, because of the lack of specialist knowledge. There's not really specialist knowledge involved. As long as you're a construction contractor, you're able to do this work. Hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Paul. I think that would go some way to answer your question, Councillor Young.
Yes, that's a great help. Thank you, Paul.
Do you have any further questions? If not, I'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the progress of initial work at Lorrionow Primary School, Carrotherstown Primary, Gatehouse Primary School, Dumfries Academy and Annan Swimming Pool as detailed in Section 4. 2. Agree additional funding of £420,000 for initial remediation works within the Council's estate to be funded from the loan charges, interest on revenue balances 23-24 underspend. And 3. Note funding of £7.6 million is required to create a programme of works that will remove RAC from the Council's estate, and this will be phased over 3 financial years and should be considered by members as part of developing their capital investment strategy proposals. So we're noting 1, agreeing 2 and noting 3. Item number 12, Energy Efficiency Spend to Save, report by Head of Economy and Development. This report updates members on the completion of energy audits and progress in reduction of energy use across the Council's estate. We are also presented with proposals for investment in a programme of spend to save works that will further reduce energy usage and associated costs in Council properties. Paul McCulloch is here to assist if members have any questions. Members, I'll open it up to debate. Councillor Dougie Campbell.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Pleased to see this report, and although it's a significant investment, it makes perfect sense to make savings in the years ahead. In the spirit of letter writing that appears to have broken out in this committee, I just wonder if the Council have written to DRACS to thank them for their investment in schools in Wards 3 and Wards 4. I'll certainly do that personally, but it's probably just a flippant remark there. On a serious note, has the audit of the buildings in the Council that will have LED lighting installed taken account of the likelihood of the Council's estate shrinking over the next few years through having a smaller workforce or indeed smaller schools? Or is the thinking behind this that the LED lighting might actually increase the value of the properties? Maybe Paul can answer that, please.
Paul, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, in terms of the list of buildings before members for approval today, we were cognisant of buildings that are if you like, surplus to requirements or maybe surplus to requirements coming forward. So we currently have a number of schools that are mothballed. Those are not included. We also have, as has been mentioned previously at committee today, industrial units that are under review. So again, they don't feature within the list. So to answer the councillor's question, yes, we've taken cognizance of the current position regarding our estate, and we've looked forward in terms of the estate as hopefully the estate size shrinks. Thanks.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, that's great. Pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Do you have any further speakers? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just on the list on the pages 165, I think, where it's the non-school estate that's been sort of listed there. So there's a few where I've just got a couple of queries, if it's okay, and I appreciate the explanation, Paul, just about the commercial properties. So there's some there that are let to tenants, but obviously we still own the building. I was just wondering why we were doing some but not others. So, for example, the Blair Center is let to a tenant, and we're investing in that, as well as Lockerbie Town Hall, but not, for example, the Lowerburn Hall, for example. We are doing the usual place, which obviously will be helpful to them. So it was just to kind of get a sense of what the logic was. I did also notice that in the let to tenant one, the Lowerburn Hall and offices, it looks as if that's been referred to as a CAT, which I think it isn't, because neither of the bodies that we considered were actually community asset transfer bodies, if I remember correctly. So I'm just sort of wondering, have we got our details right? And the other thing is just on further down that page in 166, it talks about Beach Grove Bowling and Tennis Pavilion. If it's the one in Moffat, I think that's now a community-owned centre. So I'm just wondering, I mean, they will welcome that investment, but I don't think it's our building. Do you know what I mean? So it's just to sort of double check some of the details here, so we're not spending money that we don't need to, or if we are, that we fully realise the benefits of it. Thank you.
Paul, could you add some extra information and detail about those specific sites?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Thompson, for the question. So, in deriving the list, what we did is we looked at the buildings that we are responsible for the provision of energy within. Now, what we will do as part of this proposal, before we go forward and invest in any building, is obviously double check to make sure that, you know, there may be a point in time where a building is owned by the council, but it may be as we move forward, there are proposed CATs or proposed leases. So as this programme moves forward, we will always undertake the necessary checks to make sure that the benefits derived would come back to the council.
Councillor Thompson, you coming back in?
Very quickly, I suppose, I think maybe I'd assumed maybe our property records would be sort of at least within the year up to date. I mean, some of these would be going back a fair wee bit now. I'm just thinking of the Beach Grove one in Moffat. That's been a long-standing project. If it is indeed that one, but I welcome the fact that we will get a double check. I'd probably suggest double check before you publish, rather than double check after you publish. But I mean, that's the council approach. So fair enough. Thank you.
Point taken, Councillor Thompson. I'm quite sure that we can have those ratified and double checked. We have Councillor Hagman and then Councillor Johnston.
Yeah, no, thanks for the report. And it's kind of, my question's on the back of various comments that have just been made there. And I'm looking at the list, and I appreciate Paul's comments that where school is necessarily being mothballed, it wouldn't necessarily sit on there. However, we've also had that we'll continue to review where there's leases and there's a bit of not a clear understanding of where we are on that. So I'm looking down the list, and a primary school isn't on there, and we have got a report coming up later on the agenda, and I appreciate that a primary school was mothballed in March 23, but it also says in that report that the community are looking to develop a sustainable model for the future use and optimisation of the primary school. So I guess my question is why a primary school wouldn't be on there when there is in train already an action to look at that. So do we need to add in a primary school, or would we need to agree item 15 and then review in a year's time, which seems not the best way of conducting our business. So how does that specific situation work? Thanks.
Paul, could you just clarify the position with A Primary, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, and thanks for the question, Councillor Hagman. So, A Primary School is currently mothballed. What we have in terms of a report further down the agenda is our early proposals for community use of that facility. Now, there have been various officer meetings with both local members and the groups to understand how they would possibly use the facility into the future. However, there are no guarantees at this stage, so I think A Primary School not being included on that list is the right thing at this time, but that can certainly be revisited as we go forward.
Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Hagman?
It does. I mean, maybe we need to add another recommendation. If we agree 2.3 on item 15, perhaps we need to add a 2.4 that we take a review of the LED upgrades and the council's strategy. But that's the debate for item 15, I think. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. My point's slightly related to what Councillor Hagman's just said. We've got some of these properties on here where we are not responsible for the energy consumption as part of the lease. And this is just bearing in mind the fact that we've declared a climate emergency. We're trying to pursue net zero. Would it not be possible for the council to liaise with some of these other tenants that we have, almost extolling the virtues of moving to this sort of approach, and perhaps assist some of them going forward in the future, because it's going to affect them the same as it's affecting us. And surely with the amount of money we're spending on this, we're getting economies of scale through purchasing. So I just wondered if it was an opportunity to liaise with some of these other tenants.
Seems like a very sensible point. Paul, could you come back on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So the answer is yes, we can. But what I would also say is that the benefits of some of the groups in terms of the long-term leases that they have is that they have access to funds that the council don't have access to. And indeed, some of these groups have went ahead, with permission from us, of course, and have installed LED lighting and other energy efficiency measures. But I'm saying on board, and as we move forward, we can certainly enter into dialogue with our community partners and look at how we can work together, possibly with external funding that is available to them to make these positive improvements.
Grand, that makes absolute sense. Councillor Johnston? Happy? Good. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. The former outdoor centre at Carlingworth in Castle Douglas has had a CAT transferred agreed, but at the moment Dumfries and Galloway Council remains the landlord. Now, sadly, it was badly damaged with burst pipes over the winter period, but I wonder if the upgrade to the lighting would form part of this project, because at the moment it is still owned by the council, even though a CAT transfer is imminent. Thank you.
Paul, could you just clarify the position as regards Carlingworth?
Yep, so thank you, Chair. My understanding is that Carlingworth is subject of a CAT, and I understand that the CAT paperwork, I think, has been received this week. So it wasn't the intention for the council to undertake that work at Carlingworth Outdoor Centre. And indeed, going back to my previous point, it may be that, access to alternate sources of funding that the council don't have access to would facilitate that. But again, I'm happy to have those conversations with the group. In fact, I understand there's a meeting with the group being held shortly, so we can take that forward with them. Thank you.
Grand. Thank you, Paul. If we have no further questions, I'll move to recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the energy audits undertaken across the council's estate are complete and have identified spend to save proposals which in the main involve the introduction of LED lighting and associated controls, which maximises saving benefits as noted in paragraph 4.1 and 4.2. 2. Note the total investment required to support the programme of works of 4.592 million as detailed in paragraph 4.10. And that once additional projected resources from DRACS and SALIX are taken into account, the required investment from the Council is 3.355 million, 1.8 million in 2024-25 and 1.555 million in 2025-26. And number 3, agree that additional investment requirement of 1.8 million from the 24-25 budget is funded from the Corporate Change Fund, with the remaining investment requirement of 1.555 million in the 2025-26 to be funded.
Sorry to interrupt you in full flow there. It was just on 2.3. Obviously, I did sort of raise it earlier about where the money comes from and whether or not it would be borrowed, and it does sort of allude to unless alternative funding sources can be found, which comfortable with, because I think we'll be looking at that in terms of setting our budgets. I did wonder about fans of algebra will be enthused at the last line there, but as reflected at paragraph 3x to 3y below, I was just sort of wondering what does that refer to, just for clarity. Thank you.
I think Paul was going to come in and save me there, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So typographical error. Instead of 3x to 3y, it should read paragraphs 411 to 413. Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So are we okay to agree number 3? Excellent. And sorry, one last one. 4. Note the savings of £528,000 per annum will be achieved as a result of this investment, based on a reduction in consumption of 3.2 million kilowatt hours per year. And there will also be a reduction in the Council's carbon emissions by roughly 500 tonnes. Item number 13, Procurement and Commissioning Performance Update, Financial Year 2023-24, Quarter 2, 1st of July 23 to the 30th of September 23. The report by Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides an overview on the key procurement activities delivered during the second quarter of 2023-24. This report is intended to highlight to members key issues, risks and successes relating to procurement activity during this time, and provides details of recent events held for local suppliers. Paul Garrett and Karen Scott are here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open the floor for questions. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. It's my first question this morning. It's just in relation to page 117, the easy to understand colourful chart, which I quite like. 177, sorry, I can't even get my numbers right. I'm dyslexic this afternoon. Apologies, I did this morning as well. Yeah, the colourful chart on 177, sorry, the appendix, and it says social care 4 million. Could that be broken down, or have I not seen that in the other appendix? But what is that? What's the main funding? Where does that go? Thank you.
Karen, is it possible for a breakdown today?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Dorwood. Yes, so the spend is actually broken down by contract as well, which is published on the Council website, so happy to recirculate the link to where the actual breakdown of the contracts is published.
Thank you, Karen. Will that suffice, Councillor Dorward?
Yes, thanks for the moment.
And Councillor Thompson, were you going to come in there?
Thanks, Chair. So it was just on page 174, Fourth bullet point, effectively that's saying 15% of our regulated contracts didn't include fair work conditions. So, and I appreciate that recently, I think at ENR we agreed to push for silver and then gold status, and that would be not just for employees but also, I suppose, to push for those who we employ through indirectly through contracts and etc. So I'm just sort of wondering, what can we do to improve that figure, and are we expecting to see that increase from the 85%? Thank you.
Karen, could you provide some extra detail there, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Thompson. So yeah, the 85% has seen a steady increase since 2018. It was sitting around 54%, so that has been an increased area of performance and focus, and obviously following the recent discussions as well around the zero-hour contracts accreditation scheme, that continues to be an area of focus that we'll seek to address and continue to improve upon. However, I would highlight the 15% contracts that have not had that particular question included has been where it's not been proportionate or relevant. So it may be things like buying goods as opposed to some of like our care contracts, for example, which are much more labour intensive and specifically around the individuals that would be delivering the service that's been procured.
Grant, do we have any further questions? No, I'll move to the recommendation. Members are asked to note the contents of the procurement and commissioning performance update for quarter 2 of financial year 2023-24, provided in the appendix. Duly noted. Item 14. The former Blair Center, St John Street Car Park, Dalbeattie. Report by Head of Economy and Development. Members are asked to consider the lease of the former Blair Center, John Street, Dalbeattie, to Dalbeattie Girl Guides for £1 per annum. Colin Freeman is here to assist if members have any questions. I will open up the meeting to members' questions. Councillor Stitt.
Thanks, Chair. It's just, I totally support this, but can I ask Colin, have all the terms been finalised with the group?
Thank you, Colin. Could you just clarify the terms being finalised, please?
Certainly, Chair. What we do once if agreement is reached, we'll enter into negotiations with the Girl Guides to finalise all the terms of the lease. What we've agreed to date is the heads of terms, which include that the council will maintain the building in terms of wind and water tight. The Girl Guides will take on responsibility for energy costs, utility costs. But as with previous items on the agenda, there's always dialogue between the groups to make sure that we get the best proposal possible.
Thank you, Colin. Do you want to come back in,
No,
Councillor?
that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Grant, thank you. Any further questions? I'll move to recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the recommendation of the Dalbeattie Common Good Fund Subcommittee of 13th of October 2023.
Chair, apologies, I have got my hand up. But
oh, sorry, Councillor Hagman, I didn't notice you there. Please come in.
No, you're okay. It's more of a general question, and it comes on the back of where we have got 25-year leases with other groups. Now, I'm aware that this is an ongoing process. We're reviewing our leases, and I'm not going to get into the detail as such. But within the lease, is there an element of transparency for the community? Because obviously this is a community centre. I appreciate that there's an opportunity for a community group to take this over. But is there anything within the lease that allows a review or is there any oversight over the 25-year lease? I'm just aware that there is a specific issue within my ward. As I say, I'm not going to get into the detail of it, but there was nothing in that lease, which was signed many years ago. Are we reviewing our leases going forward? Because I'm having a look and I can't see the specifics of the lease within the report today. So it's just that level of reassurance that our leases are being updated on a regular basis.
Colin, could you come in there?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to give Councillor Hagman assurances that all leases have review periods built into them, and we do continue the dialogue with our tenants on an ongoing basis to make sure that leases remain relevant and that we have the best relationship possible with our tenants.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Hagman?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's important to get that reassurance, and knowing that that's in place, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Grand. If we have no further questions, I'll move to the Oh, sorry, Councillor Young, in you come.
Just a quick clarification. Obviously, when you lease a building, you're still responsible for the wind and water tight, but who pays for the insurance of these leased buildings? Is it the council or is it the tenant?
Colin, could you come back in there, please?
Thank you, Chair. Through the dialogue, we ensure that the tenant has all the necessary insurances, public liability insurance, indemnification for the council, etc. And we have the conversation with the tenant whether it would be best suited for the council to maintain the insurance of the building, or whether it be more appropriate for the tenant to take on the liability of insurance. So that's something that will be discussed with the tenant should the agreement be reached today, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Is that okay, Councillor Young?
Yes, that clarifies it. Thank you, Chair.
And one further question, Councillor Thompson.
Yep, thank you. So I was otherwise fine, but now at 4.2 it says the council would continue to insure the building. So have we decided to do that as part of this report, or is that part of ongoing discussions? It's just as I'd read that and thought, all right, we're insuring the building. That's that. But now it seems that, well, actually it's just a discussion. So what are we agreeing here?
Colin, could you just come back for a little bit of clarity there, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The insurance, as detailed in the initial heads of terms, will be covered by the council, but that conversation will then take place with the tenant to see what the most appropriate means of insurance will be moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Grand. So we will move to recommendations. Members are asked to 1. Note the recommendation of the Dalbeattie Common Good Fund Subcommittee of the 13th of October 23, contained in paragraph 3.1, and 2. Agree the Dumfries and Galloway Council lease the former Blair Center, John Street, Dalbeattie, to the Dalbeattie Girl Guides for the sum of £1 per annum for a period of 25 years, as at paragraph 4.2. All other terms to be agreed by the Property, Estates and Programmes Manager. Item number 15. Community use of A Primary School. Report by Head of Economy and Development. Committee is asked to consider and agree a 1-year licence to occupy A Primary School by A Community Groups under the supervision of A Community Council. Colin Freeman is here to assist if members have any questions. Members? Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of a preamble, if you will allow me, in terms of this specific report. It doesn't actually reflect some of the discussions that were had with the Community Council. Perhaps these weren't minuted, but they're not reflected in the paper. And if you could indulge me just to reflect that on behalf of the Community Council, please, of this committee. So yeah, the school was mothballed in March 2023, but it's worth noting that the school roll was 15 in November 2022, according to Dumfries and Galloway Council website. So it was mothballed in the space of 4 months, very, very quickly. The Community Council was discontinued and then recontinued after that, so it's a fairly new Community Council, if that makes sense. Also, on the 5th of December 2019, from Education Committee papers, 576,000 was put towards a primary school for refurbishment at that point in time. So it's a very, very healthy new building, despite the fact it might not have LED lighting in it. It's a very healthy building. Separate discussion, perhaps. in A, as a village, which happens to be in the ward that I'm a councillor for, there's no other building that the community can use for recreation purposes. And whilst the school's been open, the community have used this, as the community council have, but the community have used it as well for a number of clubs, for Easter, Christmas celebrations, summer holidays. There's a community garden there as well, and a group for what they call over 55 older people, which I might take issue with, but that's what it is, and it's a really good group. So it's used a lot. As I say, extensive discussions have gone on with the council about this, and the council is putting down in terms of recommendations. They agreed to grant a 1-year licence to occupy the primary school, which is reasonable. However, the community council were initially offered in November 2023 a 2-year licence, which would allow them to, as a new community council, to do some work in terms of, if the school remains mothballed, they might go for a community asset transfer at the end of 2 years. And the 2-year period covers the period of discussion around mothballing. So I think that would be a reasonable, proportionate thing to do if this committee agrees to that. So rather than a 1-year lease, it would be a 2-year lease in terms of continuity for the community council. In terms of costs as well, I won't go into the detail about this because it's not in the report, but again, they were discussed with the community council. The community council is not a wealthy community council, it's a new community council, and what they are asking for is that the costs quoted to them are halved, so they pay 50% of the costs, and they're happy to do that as an annual fixed fee. So, long story short, in terms of this, I would propose that rather than at 2.3, we amend that to reflect the facts that it goes to a 2-year licence and that the costs are reduced by 50% for the community council for the next 2 years. I think that's fair and proportionate given where we are with this primary school. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that proposal, Councillor Dorward. I'll bring in some other members first of all, and we can see what the consensus is going to be. Councillor Stitt, and then Councillor Johnston's online, sorry. Can I take Councillor Johnston first? Then Councillor Stitt, and then Councillor Thompson. Thank you. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Just to reiterate everything that Councillor Dorward has said, and I note that we're being asked to agree a 1-year term, but the certainty of a 2-year licence, that gives the community more time to access needs, which is bringing the community together in a familiar and accessible building. Now, having a building to meet in, that gives continuity to the groups which have already been mentioned, reducing isolation, supporting the residents of A Village and the environs. And the Community Council consciously picked a 2-year duration to work in conjunction with the mothballing timescale determined by the Education Committee. And there was also a question they were asking about indemnity for any loss or damage and who would be responsible, and a payment of £1,500 per annum, which is a one-off payment, and there would be no further costs included in that. I would like to request that we grant a 2-year licence to occupy a primary school and lands, allowing more time for a sustainable model for tenure to be established. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. So, reiterating Councillor Dorward's point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Stitt.
I'll just, after second Councillor Dorward's proposal. Chair, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I mean, no issue with that at all. I mean, I think obviously the discussions that have taken place to date and the way they've been described, I think there's no reason not to support that. I mean, I'm just sort of curious why the report in front of us only suggests a 1-year report when clearly the discussions that have been had up to date were based around maybe a case going forward on a 2-year licence. So, but happy to agree that if it gets it done, and hopefully we can take it forward. They all seem to be agreed on it, which is good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have no issues with this at all. Although there's been a couple of mentions about funding. You know, there's been £1,500 mentioned, and I think Councillor Dorward mentioned about half the funding. I don't see any funding in the actual report, so I'm a wee bit confused about what funding they're actually talking about at this moment in time. But no, I'm happy for a 2-year licence to occupy. That's probably the sensible way to go. But I would also like to add a 2.4 if that's possible, because we did have the discussion earlier on about the LEDs, and you know, that 2.4 agree that the work undertaken to add a primary school to the list of properties in Appendix 1 on item 12 to the committee for the energy efficiencies. So I'd like to add that on if that's agreeable by the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'm not sure, had we suggested that these organisations could utilise third sector funding for the LED lighting? Was that the take on it, I believe?
Yeah, but I mean, if we're talking about they're already got expenses anyway, initially, it's just a new community council. It'll probably take a bit of time before they even can get, you know, that kind of funding. But if it's still going to be a school property before it's handed over, it should be included in the LED programme.
As a mothballed property though, Councillor Campbell, would that still enable it to have this LED lighting undertaken?
Well, if it's mothballed, isn't it? You know, but if a community is taking over a lease or a licence to occupy, you know, it's still a council building and it should be part of the LED programme. You know, if it's an asset transfer, then that's a different thing altogether. But it's not an asset transfer at this moment in time.
Cool. I'll seek further clarification on that. I'll bring Lorna in on this one.
I think in the previous item, members asked if we would look at these items subject to decision today. So if members are so minded to agree to the lease and whatever decision is made today, then we can look at that. I would draw members' attention to paragraph 4.5 in the bullets there, and perhaps in further debate and the clarity of the decision today, if members are so minded, is around those financial contributions. But if the council was being asked to provide support to the utility use around the occupation, which I think is what's been suggested, if there was some contribution, then of course it would be in the council's best interest to reduce the costs of that. But certainly that's something we can take into account once the decision starts to progress today.
I'll take Councillor Hagman first of all.
Yeah, no, thank you for this. I think there's broad agreement, if I'm hearing correctly, in the Chamber for a 2-year licence, which I'm happy to support. I'm also happy to support the additional recommendation from Councillor John Campbell around agree that additional work is undertaken to include, and I think it is helpful that the Director's pointed out paragraph 4.5, because that states in there that the council maintains its statutory compliance responsibilities as landlords. So if we're maintaining our statutory responsibilities, this building then gets included as part of our climate change duties reporting, which is what the LED programme is looking to address. I do realise that Section 4.6 says any future long-term occupation under the licence would see a shift in those responsibilities. So I don't think we're at that point yet. So I would just like to sort of formally support Councillor John Campbell's additional recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hagman. We have Councillor Diggy Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a clarification, please. And I appreciate that ward members might have more detail in this, but have the Community Council asked for a 1-year licence, or is the 1-year licence being determined by the Council? And I apologise if I've missed that point, but it's just to clarify, please.
Colin, could you just assist on this one, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The detail in the report is based on the most recent conversations we've had with the Community Council. However, I'm happy to take on board members' comments, and if members agree to a 2-year licence, happy to take that forward, Chair.
Thank you. Will that suffice, Councillor Campbell, or no?
No, I'm still a bit unclear because we're talking about a 1-year licence, but the discussion and debate has referred to a 2-year licence. Specifically, what are the Community Council asking for, or is the 1-year licence, as per this report, something that the Council want?
Yeah, I think what's being suggested is that we're helping them out by suggesting a 2-year, a longer lease. But I mean, I will bring back in Councillor Dorward, who has the ward knowledge. But first of all, could I bring Councillor Thompson? Were you wanting to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Very quickly. So I was just looking back at the item 12 list. So there's, I think potentially that list maybe needs reviewed anyway. I think we were saying that was going to get double checked. They might find there might be space within that budget to carry out the works as suggested. And either way, now that we've effectively agreed whether it's 1 year or 2 years, hopefully 2 years, there'll be that time for the building to be made more fit for modern purposes, and whatever happens to the building in future, it'll be in better nick and cheaper to run for everybody, whoever owns it. So happy to support the additional recommendation. But other than that, and before Councillor Dorward comes in, it might be helpful if reports like this indicated what the community was actually asking for, rather than just maybe what the officer recommendation is, because I'm sure the local knowledge might reveal that the community was quite clear about what they were looking for. So, and hopefully Councillor Dorward can help with that. Thank you.
I think Councillor Thompson will come back to that and add it as an additional recommendation after we speak further to Councillor Dorward for the local knowledge.
Thank you, Chair. It's very definite, and for the record, the Community Council would prefer a 2-year lease, not a 1-year lease. Thank you.
Grand. So it appears that we're all minded to go for the 2-year, to amend recommendation number 3 to 2-year. As far as the suggestion about the costs, Councillor Dorward, could you elaborate further on what your intention was there?
It's not my intention. I'm only reflecting the request of the Community Council. The Community Council are not a well-funded Community Council, and they're embryonic in nature. So what they're asking for, and if I can quote this, they're quoted approximately by the Council £3,000 per annum for the lease of, isn't it the school, it's just a room in the school. What they're prepared to do is offer half of that, which is 1,500 initially, which leaves them a budget of 2,500, broadly speaking, over the year to cover various community events, Community Council costs, and the running of the club and the outside garden, to keep things in a status quo for 2 years until it's decided what to do with the school. I think that's reasonable and fair and proportionate given where we are at the moment. Thank you.
I'll bring Lorna in here.
Councillor Dorward, in relation to 2.3, to reflect on those comments, obviously members are moving towards agreeing to grant a 2-year licence to occupy a primary school and land in order for the Community Council to work with the local community to develop a model and mechanism for a longer tenure of the asset. I think a further recommendation to note the position of the Community Council in terms of contribution to costs, and delegate to officers to discuss and negotiate that suitably with the Community Council to progress the licence to occupy. I'm conscious members don't have firm information in front of them, so if members were agreed to something around those terms for officers to proceed. And I think finally a 2.5 rather than 2.4, a further recommendation to include a primary school in the LED programme previously agreed, until to include that as part of the programme set out. I think Councillor Campbell, that was what you were proposing. You might be wrong.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. Right, I'm just scribbling down the further recommendations here, just so we've got it completely clear. So, if we have no further... Councillor Maureen Johnston, would you want to come back in there?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think all the points that I was going to bring up were covered, and the Community Council did initially request a 2-year lease. Thank you.
Do we have any further contributions? Okay, I shall try and summarise the recommendations. 1. To note the positive work undertaken by A Community Council and council officers as detailed in paragraph 4.3. 2. Note the longer term aspirations of A Community Council in regard to maximising the opportunities presented by the mothballed primary school building and land as detailed at paragraph 4.6. And 3. To agree to grant a 2-year licence to occupy a primary school and land in order for the Community Council to work with the local community to develop a model and mechanism for a longer term tenure of the asset. And the additional recommendation number 4, for members to agree for officers to have further dialogue and discussion with the A Community Council as far as costs are concerned. Are we happy with that?
Great.
And 2.5, also to include a primary school in the LED lighting programme. Are we all agreed? Fantastic,
Agreed.
Thank goodness. Now, as it is now almost 1 p.m, are members happy just to continue with the agenda? Fantastic. Item number 16. Kirkcudbright Tennis Club and land, 2 courts and clubhouse building. Community asset transfer, St Mary Street, Kirkcudbright. Report by Interim Head of Community and Services. This report presents a Stage 2 community asset transfer application from Kirkcudbright Tennis Club for the transfer of Kirkcudbright Tennis Club and clubhouse building, St Mary Street, Kirkcudbright, for our consideration. Jamie Ferguson and Ingrid Gemmell are here to assist with any members' questions. I'll open the floor for members' questions. And no. Oh, Councillor Campbell, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's I'm in support of what the tennis club wants to do, but I'm just wondering, you know, as asset transfers doesn't really necessarily mean transferring the property over. You can actually have an asset transfer of a 25-year lease, for example, because in my own ward there was Georgetown Community Council and they seem to be doing very well with that. I'm just wondering, has that been discussed with the tennis club? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Jamie or Ingrid, could you come in on those 2 points, please?
Yeah, good afternoon, members, and thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to confirm that discussions were had with Kirkcudbright Tennis Club and that they were very clear in their application in terms of ownership. Thank you.
Grand, thank you, Ingrid. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I'm happy to support a transfer. I think it's a really positive outcome for the community, where a community are looking to take forward an asset and where they've put in a lot of work to make that case. I think they need to be absolutely commended. My point is more a technical one, and it's a question that has been asked for the 6.5 years that I've been in this position. The then ward member, Jane Maitland, used to ask it, I think, often and regularly, and this is the issue about the use of £1 for the transfer. Now, my understanding, unless there's been an upgrade or a review of our policy, every community group must demonstrate that they have at least tried to find additional resources to make a contribution to the asset value. So has that been done by the community? And I appreciate that every community says, well, everybody else has had it for £1, so we're only going to offer £1. And, you know, it's a comment that we make year after year after year. And it is an unfortunate situation that at some point we draw a line. But if we're not going to ever draw that line, can we please amend our policy? Because why have we got it in our policy if we're not putting it through? So if we're going to agree this for £1, perhaps we need to put a recommendation to communities upgrade the policy, because we've got a policy in place that we never follow. We haven't followed it for years. So it's maybe more of a comment, but I would be interested to know if there has been any movement. I don't sit in communities, and obviously I'm no longer in the administration, so I don't know if this is something that's being discussed elsewhere. So any thoughts would be welcome. Thank you.
Jamie, would you be able to add some further information there?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Hagman. We look with every group that goes through community asset transfer to ask them to seek funding towards payment towards building. What we do is we take it through social value engine as well. We are about to, we're looking to review the community asset transfer process, and we'll certainly be seminaring with members again on community asset transfer. There is potential there, and we've sought advice on this from Community Ownership Support Scotland. We can, I think, some of the Ayrshires at one point had a 10% that they wouldn't transfer a building, beneath 10% of whatever the market value was. So those kind of options will be there for members. Although, what to say is that as part of that, what we'll be doing an exercise, Councillor Hagman, with the groups where we social value as a kind of potential value in terms of looking at the business plans or the community plans, if you want to call them that community asset transfer bodies put forward. We're now in a position, I suppose, quite a few years down the line, because sometimes the kind of inward investment is a bit that gets missed. We have been going back to the community groups that have undergone community asset transfer. And I know it's slightly a tangent to your question, but we've been looking at how much investment they have brought into Dumfries and Galloway via external funding, not directly to the council, but what they've brought into the community in terms of project funding that they've I was listening to the earlier discussion about the fact that communities obviously have access to funding that councils haven't. We're sitting at a 1:6. I think it's about 6.4 ratio, but I'd need to absolutely do my sums to confirm that. Certainly over 6. For every pound we are kind of investing as a council, the community in terms of external funding is bringing back in 6 times that. Now, that's not a direct payment to the council, but certainly investment into those local communities. So as I say, Councillor Hagman, I know it's a general question you're asking. Ingrid may be able to talk to the specifics of this community group. I don't know the kind of granular detail of this community group, but as a general principle, we will be looking to review policy. Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. Ingrid, is there anything else to add to that?
No, just to reaffirm the fact that Jamie had stated there that conversations were had with the group around bringing in external funding, but you'll note within the application that the group strive to pull in other external monies, and their focus at that point was around making sure that they upgraded the facility because it was getting to a state where it was unusable. So we're looking at all options at the point of the application being made. Hope that's helpful.
Grand, thank you, Ingrid. Katie, do you want to come back in on that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, I support the ambitions, and I think it's great, and I am aware that there's a lot of work being done, but I'm also aware that there's specific funding from investing in communities, and I'm just checking just now. There's £27 million worth of funding for various rounds from Scottish Government, so there is funding out there. But it would appear that our communities don't apply for that funding or don't feel that they need to apply for the funding because they'll get it for £1 anyway. And where there is Scottish Government funding, and I'm looking to tackle poverty, for community-led regeneration, for developing sustaining place-based approaches, all these things, this project would sit within. And it almost feels like we're missing a trick. We're missing the opportunity to bid into these funding pots that are available. So, no, I appreciate we're not going to solve it today. I'm happy to support the project as is because there's been a lot of work going in. But I do feel that we need to be a bit smarter about this because there's funding, and if we support the aspirations of land reform and all that entails, we should be doing it properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haben. I mean, I suppose it comes down to the individual community groups, you know, what level of ability they have or what level of motivation they have to go and source the funding. But I quite agree there are massive sums of money out there for these groups to be applying for. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, absolutely support that clarity around the policy. I appreciate that obviously the general value that a group like this can bring to the wider community is obviously measurable using the sort of tools and indicators Jamie's mentioned, but this is really about the transaction itself in terms of the transfer. So that's quite specific, and there are pots of money, as Councillor Hagman's alluded to. It's money coming into the region and ultimately to our coffers, which helps us continue to provide services. So the only people losing out really is us and then the people we serve. So why we wouldn't do that through our ward officers and communities, I'm sure we would. And just looking at the business case from the organisation, the way that's been presented suggests an organisation that's more than capable and has certainly demonstrated how to access and tap into various types of funds and sponsorships, etc. So I would not hesitate to think that they were capable of doing that. So I think we should get that clarity at least and champion that through our ward officers who are helping to support these groups whenever they're putting the bids to make sure that they know, do you know what, you can get money and it'll actually help the wider region. Just on that, I mean, it does seem to, I think page 239 in the business case, there is a sort of interesting history where I suppose it's been framed in a way that the council then couldn't uphold its part of the deal in terms of investing in the state of the asset. And then this is after the club had sold the property to the council for £1 back in the day. So maybe there's a bit of full circle here as well, just poetically anyway. But in terms of the recommendations, happy to support this, but I would happy to support it on the basis of option 2, if you want that indication now, or if we're going to get to that as part of 2.5. Thank you, Chair.
I think Jamie would like to come in on that point, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I won't labour it. I know it's a more general point, probably not totally contained within the papers for this meeting, but we do direct groups towards Scottish Land Fund, you know, and similar through our ward officers, and direct them to support through third sector, Dumfries and Galloway, who provide funding advice also to any groups involved in CAT. Some of them also work with Community Ownership Support Service Scotland. So there is that, certainly that effort does go in through the ward officers, although I do accept there may be a kind of history to this where groups, through providing social value, work in the assumption that they don't partially fund what they could be funding. So maybe that's something we can discuss internally and kind of renew efforts on that. But as I say, we will be reviewing policy. Thanks, Chair. I know it's not quite on this topic, but thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Yep. And Councillor Dougie Campbell.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to speak in this item, but I am now, and I should have made a declaration of interest as I'm a trustee of the Common Good, so I apologise for that. Just for the purposes of the meeting and the recording, I know that Kirkcudbright Tennis Club will be listening in. Just to clarify, it wasn't Councillor Dougie Campbell that suggested the 25-year lease. They were quite adamant that they wanted a full transfer, and you know, we can have the debate about how much money the applicants have to pay in future, but I think we need to deal with the report that's in front of us. And just to draw that to a conclusion, I would propose that we go with option 2. Thank you.
Grand. Thank you, members. If we're all minded and there's no more questions, Will we move to the recommendations? Members are asked to 1. Consider Kirkcudbright Community Tennis Club's transfer request as laid out in the Stage 2 Asset Transfer Application, Appendix 1, and the Community/Business Plan, Appendix 2. 2. Consider the outcome of the officer assessment of the request in relation to the Council's requirement to meet best value as detailed in paragraph 4.5.3 and the officer recommendation at paragraph 4.9. 3. To note the outcome of the social value assessments of the proposed transfer as detailed at paragraph 4.6.2. And 4. Note the recommendation from Kirkcudbright Common Good Fund Subcommittee detailed in paragraph 4.9. And lastly, to consider and agree, and it appears option 2, from those listed at paragraph 4.11. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. Okay, item number 17. Is there any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision? Nothing's been brought to my attention. So we'll move to item number 18. The Local Government Act 1973. Do we agree to the adoption of a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A 4, paragraph 6 and 9 of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973? Agreed. And Nick, can you come in just now, please?